Hello, hello. I am here today for something that is not a TBR video and also not a vlog. Imagine that. It's been a while since I did that. Um, yeah, I am actually going to be doing a wrap up, which you will have seen from the title. And I'm going to do a wrap up for January and February. So I'll talk about the books that I read in both of those months. I think it was 19 books. Which sounds like a lot more than it is. There were definitely graphic novels and Animorphs books in there. So, yes. So, let's jump into the books and I will talk about what I read. So, the first thing that I read in 2022 was Bitter Orange by Claire Fuller. I read Unsettled Ground last year because of the Women's Prize and really fell in love with Claire Fuller's writing, and so then wanted to read everything that she's written, and this was the one that my bookstore had, so I picked it up and decided to jump into it for my first book of the year. And this was not at all what I was expecting. It is definitely like a twisty, turny psychological thriller, but in the quietest possible way. It's one of those things where like the whole time it feels unsettling and you know something is going to go horribly wrong, and there's foreshadowing for the fact that something's going to go horribly wrong, but like you're never quite sure what it's going to be or how it's going to happen until it happens. But like there's an unease to this entire book, which I loved. I'm not a big thriller fan, but I do kind of get along okay with psychological thrillers, and I think because that in combination with the writing and how descriptive and beautiful Claire Fuller's writing is, it worked really well for me. So yes, I was a big fan of this and will definitely be moving on to Swimming Lessons, which is the next book that I have of hers. And then after I read that, I listened to the audiobook of Hani and Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating. I love the fake dating trope. Like that's my favorite contemporary like romance trope is fake dating. So this worked really well for me. I have also really loved the other books by this author and or book by this author, although she has a new one coming out end of this year, I think, that's like a heist book on the Titanic, and usually I don't like heist books, but like Titanic and Sapphic, but I'm getting on a tangent. This book is also Sapphic, obviously, and it is like YA middle grade-ish. I would say it's more on the YA side, and it's about these two girls who are in different situations. So one of them is really trying to please her parents and be like a model student, a model daughter. The other one is trying to prove to her friends that she's actually bisexual because they don't believe that she's bisexual because she's never been in a relationship with a girl. And yes, so it touches on that and how problematic that is. It's definitely got, you know, toxic friendship, which is obvious from the way that that synopsis kind of plays out. But I really liked the dynamic between the girls and just how they balance each other as characters, and how yeah, just how their relationship kind of helped them both in different ways. So yes, fake dating, awesome. Sapphic, awesome. I guess it's bisexual rep, not necessarily sapphic, but you know, you get the point. Anyways, highly recommend this one. Next was this beautiful book. So this is A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers, and this was sent to me by Tor.com for review, and I screamed. It also came with like some stickers and a pen and stuff. And yeah, so this is my most anticipated book of the year, and it did not disappoint in the least. This was actually, in my opinion, better than the first one. So the first one takes place, basically our main character which is they're a non-binary tea monk, and they kind of leave the confines of their normal everyday world and venture outside of the, I was going to say the beaten path, but literally, and encounter the first robot to speak to humankind since the robots got up and just left at one point. So it is touching on like humanity and just, I don't know, it has that Becky Chambers feel of just like hope punk, I guess is what they call it. But both characters, Mosscap the robot and Dex the tea monk, are fantastic layered characters, and this adds so much more layering to their characters. You learn a lot more about the things that matter to Mosscap, and you learn a lot more about what Dex is dealing with and struggling with, and it's all just so very relatable, and also just a feast for the senses in reading this. So I really liked getting to see different parts of this world and get to know our characters better. So this is one to look forward to. If you haven't read the first one, I would highly recommend it. I read it twice last year, and I will be reading this one twice this year because I'll be listening to the audiobook when it comes out in July? Yes, July. Next up, I read The Office of Historical Corrections by Danielle Evans, and this one is a collection of short stories, and then the title story is like a novella. It's like 100 and something pages, I think. And this is really interesting. I will be honest and say that I don't remember a ton about it. The novella, The Office for Historical Corrections, touches on basically these people are in a government job that is to go out and fact check things and issue corrections when they're not correct, and something happens and the narrator has to then go deal with this fact checking gone wrong situation that also requires them to investigate some additional ties to the original information. So it's very interesting. I know that there was a story in here that I really loved, but I am blanking on which one that was. Yeah, I don't know. It was very good though. Like, I highly enjoyed each of the stories, and though I don't remember a lot about them, I had a good time reading them and wanted to keep reading, and I would definitely pick up other things by Danielle Evans. Next, I had this beautiful graphic novel out from the library. This is the first in the Tea Dragon Society graphic novels. I don't know if this is going to be a long series or if it's just going to be the 3 that are currently out. I did already go ahead and put the other 2 on hold at the library, and they should be coming in this week, so that's exciting. But this is a really charming, just sweet graphic novel in like a fantasy world where these dragons grow tea on their head. So they're like different kinds of dragons that grow different kinds of tea, and they have different temperaments and things based on that. And it's about this girl who is essentially studying to become a guardian for one of these tea dragons. So yeah, it's really sweet. It's beautiful. The art is stunning, and I would highly recommend it. Then I picked up another one that was on the Women's Prize long list. So I obviously didn't read it when it was on the long list. It didn't make the short list, but I remember being very interested in it. So I had picked it up, and I decided to dive into it after reading Bitter Orange. The oranges just sort of got me. This one is about this woman who is a journalist, and they have like an editorial or something where you can submit questions or write letters, and a woman writes a letter saying that her daughter was a virgin birth, And so then this woman is assigned that letter to research and work with this woman to find out, like, if this is true. Basically, the paper is trying to prove this woman wrong. And so then the reporter gets kind of connected and linked in with this family in a lot of different ways throughout the they do blood tests and things to try to figure it out. Some of that felt a little like not realistic, in that I don't know why this woman would subject herself to that, but that's a question that comes up in here and is sort of addressed. But there were some things in this book that didn't exactly work for me. But the woman does, like, there's sort of there is an aspect of this book that is investigative journalism, which I really enjoyed. There's another book that I read quite a few years ago that was called, oh my goodness, I'm blanking on what it's called. The Midnight Watch, which is about the Titanic in a roundabout way, but it's also about investigative journalism. And that's something that was in this that really worked for me. The relationships between the characters are very messy. Our main character is not particularly happy in her life before she meets this family. And then it's sort of, you know, all the interconnected things that happen throughout the book. I will say that I could have done without the last chapter. I'm not going to say anything about what happens, but I think most people who have seen someone speak about this book have already heard this. But basically the novel is fantastic, and the last chapter, it just destroys the entire feelings you have. I'm not going to get any more specific than that, but basically you could skip it and pretend it doesn't exist, and I would like it not to exist. So there's what I have to say about that. All right, I'm going to try this again because I previously talked about this next book, which is the Burma Chronicles, and I went on like a 20-minute rant, and nobody needs that. But I will start out by saying this book is shit. Don't read this. This is a graphic novel about a Canadian man whose wife was a doctor in like something akin to Doctors Without Borders out of France. She was serving in Myanmar to help the Karen people. I believe that's the group of people that she was actively helping, bringing aid to those people. While her husband and her toddler, or like infant toddler, were back in Yangon, the capital city of Myanmar, basically just living. He didn't really have to do anything. He didn't have a job, but he was just at home with the baby, which is, you know, enough of a job. I ended up hate reading this by the end. So I will preface this by saying I have a friend who's born in Myanmar, who currently lives in Myanmar. And so as an American, I have a better understanding of Myanmar and its people and its politics than your average American. Totally understand that, so I'm coming at this with more information than the author actually has about this country. So, what I could not deal with this book is, the first thing is, he continues, even though he acknowledges that Burma is not the name that the people of Myanmar use, he continues to call it Burma. He also refers to Yangon as Rangoon at some point, which again is not the name of the city according to the people of Myanmar. So this book was written at a time when that is something that was common knowledge. So he continues to just be ignorant and willfully ignorant at points. He also spends the entire graphic novel pissing and moaning about minor inconveniences to himself. So like he can't get specific foods, he experiences electricity blackouts, the air conditioning goes off sometimes, and he does admit that he lives in the diplomatic village, and so that happens rarely, whereas things like electricity blackouts, internet blackouts, lack of access to air conditioning, running water, things like that are common occurrences throughout Myanmar and something that the people of Myanmar deal with on a regular basis. And yet he is just like complaining about it constantly, like it is the worst thing that's ever happened to him. He also only sort of surface level touches on the actual like history and politics and customs of Myanmar, and he, like, some of the characters he draws are like racially offensive. When he talks about beetroot or beetle nut, it's this leaf, I think, that the people of Myanmar often chew that makes their gums and their teeth red. He does some offensive drawings around that. He also, at one point, talks about the junta, which is the dictator, military dictatorship that is in Myanmar, and the current, I will leave some links down below if you want to know what's going on there. It is not being talked about globally, but the people of Myanmar have been suffering for over a year. Not going to get into that. I'll link it down below if you're interested. But he talks about the junta, and he talks about what the junta have been doing to this population of people in this certain area of Myanmar. And then immediately, like 2 panels later, it's like, wee, yay, I snuck in. This is the place they don't want you to see because of all the horrors and the, like, what they're doing to these people. But he's celebrating that he can be a tourist in this area. Not that he got in so that he can report on it or talk about it, just that he can be a tourist. And, like, he proceeds to then never touch on the fact that, like, horrific things are happening there. So, all of this to say, this is garbage. This man should have never been allowed to publish this book because it clearly never went through a sensitivity reader that knows anything about Myanmar. And yes, this ain't it. After that rant. So the next book that I read was These Precious Days by Ann Patchett. This is a gorgeous slice of life essay collection. So it's just like Ann Patchett talking about things that have happened to her, talking about the people in her life. There's a story about the 3 men who have been like father figures to her, so like her dad and her 2 stepfathers, and how each of them impacted her life in different ways, and kind of about each one of them individually. The standout for this to me was the title story, These Precious Days, which is about her friendship and kind of moving through the pandemic with this woman named Suki, who was Tom Hanks' assistant, and she sort of like peripherally met her, and then they struck up a friendship over email, and then how that friendship becomes something really, really special at a critical point in Suki's life. And then we also kind of see them navigating the early stages of the pandemic, which I thought was super interesting. And like, I feel like I'm not ready for pandemic novels, but at the same time, seeing ordinary people, or I mean, she's an author, a very famous author, so I guess ordinary is the wrong word, but seeing other people and how they navigated those early days of the pandemic is really interesting to me. So I thought that aspect of it was fantastic, and I just always enjoy the insight and just like calm, reassuring words of Ann Patchett. Her essay collections are always something that I vibe really well with. And then the last book I read in January was this one, which is the 27th book in the Animorphs series. I then went on in February to read 2 more, so 28 and 29. So 3 more Animorphs down. Not gonna say a lot about these because I honestly don't think you guys care about the individual books. I do plan on doing like an overall video when I get to the end of it. If anybody's actually interested in me doing like a halfway point breakdown, I'd be happy to do that because I am halfway through it. But my only comment would be the comment I hate in one of my vlogs, which is, are the people who read these as teenagers okay now? Because this shit is dark, like disturbing. Also, did they get a lot of sleep? Because I feel like if I read this as a teenager, I would not get a lot of sleep. All right, then I read another graphic novel from the library, which was Lore Olympus, which has been breaking everywhere, and I can confirm after reading it that I don't actually understand why. This is like a Hades and Persephone retelling, and I think it was a webcomic maybe, or is a webcomic. I just don't get this. It's just okay. Like, it's pretty, and it's really dramatic with like the pinks and the blues, but I guess I don't have a thing about Persephone and Hades, so maybe if you do, then you'll really like this, but I didn't get the appeal. It was just okay, and I won't keep reading, so there's that. Then I read this in one day. Several people are typing, which is... I don't even know how to explain this. This is basically a, like, this guy gets stuck in the Slack channel at work. So he works for like a PR firm, and one day he gets stuck in the Slack channel. So he's trying to upload a spreadsheet, and somehow in doing so he uploaded his consciousness to the Slack channel, and it's a little dystopian, a little like, it's like office dystopian. I don't even know. I feel like this is a genre of some sort, but the way it's told in like actual like Slack chat way, which is hysterical. I think that super adds to it, but also you see kind of through those conversations, because he can only talk through the Slack chat, you see his interactions with his coworkers, and it's a good window into corporate America, and it's also interesting like work friendships and how they develop, and then also like the dystopian kind of metaverse part of this. Yeah, it's something. I feel like this has a certain audience. I found it hilarious, but I feel like some people would find this really stressful. So there is that. And then I listened to the audiobook of Wahala by Nikki May, and this book, I have mixed feelings on this, if I'm being honest. So it was billed as like Nigerian Sex and the City. It doesn't take place in Nigeria. It takes place in London, and all of the characters are part Nigerian, so I think they're all half Nigerian. And it's like a friends group, and then this woman who used to be friends with one of them sort of infiltrates their friends group. And part of me was like, the Sex and the City girls would never. Like, they would never let somebody do this to their friends group. So like that comparison, I think, was part of what I didn't like. So I think that this is being marketed wrong. But it is very much a thriller, like a psychological thriller again, because it's these 4 people, and this woman is infiltrating, and she is slowly threading seeds of doubt in their friendships, and it just kind of, you see how those little things can grow and feed on the insecurities of each of the women in this friends group. And I thought it was done really well. The ending came really fast and heavy, and yeah, it was a little crazy. And I thought that the epilogue was odd, so there's that. But I thought that it was a wild ride, and I think that if you're looking for something that's like a psychological thriller with like female friendships, this is a good one. It does sort of deal with with female friendships in a really interesting way. So you do see them supporting each other, but you also see how someone else could cause things to sort of come apart at the threads. So yeah, I thought this one was really good, and I would recommend it if that's something you're interested in. All right, and then the next audiobook I listened to was Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston, and this was incredible. I talked about this in one of my vlogs, but this is so good. So Amari is, when we meet her, she is kind of in this school where she is an outcast and people are bullying her, and she has recently lost her brother. Her brother is missing, so they don't know where he is. He hasn't actually been declared dead, but he's sort of like in that likely to be presumed dead situation, but she and her mother don't believe that that is what happened, based on his character and all of that. And then she finds out that she has this special ability, so she's invited to this sort of like secret school camp thing. And there's this whole other world that she has never known about. And so she is going into that, seeking out her brother, and it's about her and her magic, and what her magic, I think it's on the back that her magic is illegal, like how she has to deal with that, and the ramifications of that, and then just sort of the dynamics of the camp and the investigation into her brother's disappearance. And it was so good. It had so like that fantasy world where it's like you never knew about this your whole life, and then suddenly there's this whole other world that you get to learn about and be a part of, very much like the series that will not be named, but also similar to, oh God, what's the overarching series called? The Morgan Crow series. I keep thinking of all of the names of the books, but I, for some reason, cannot think of the actual name of that series. But basically, like that. It had those feelings. So if that's something that you like in a middle grade book, then I think that this is going to be right up your alley. It's very different, but also like it has that same feeling. So yes, the second one comes out, I think in June or July, and I will be getting the audiobook of that as soon as it comes out. And I finally read Heartstopper Volume 4. This was just as good as the rest of the Heartstoppers, but this one does deal with a lot of hard topics. So it deals with like coming out, it deals with eating disorders, it deals with navigating hard things in a relationship. So there's a lot in here that is hard-hitting. So not as happy-go-lucky as some of the previous volumes, but still with that like warmth that is very much part of this series. So not a lot to say about this, but it is a queer romance and it is still adorable. I swear I'm almost done. I have 2 books left. I need to stop talking. This one, You Truly Assumed by Layla Sabrine, I listened to on audiobook. This is a book about 3 Black Muslim teenage girls who meet after one of them starts a blog sort of by accident in response to a terrorist attack that happens in her city that was perpetrated by someone who was not Muslim but had a name that sounded Muslim, and so people immediately assumed that this person was Muslim, and the ramifications of that. So these 3 women come together as part of this blog, as like the admin team for this blog, and you get to see each of their experiences, not only how this terrorist attack has affected their lives and their communities, but also just like their day-to-day lives. So you just get to see their day-to-day lives outside of that. And I just thought this was so refreshing and interesting and engrossing. This was such a good book, and I will absolutely read anything Layla Sabrine writes in the future, because this has been one of the best things I've read all year. And then the last one, It's a slim little thing. Recitatif by Toni Morrison. The foreword on this is by Zadie Smith. Yeah, by Zadie Smith. And the foreword does explain a lot of the book. So depending on how you like to read these things, you may want to read the story and then go back and read the introduction. I actually listened to the audiobook, and I listened to Zadie Smith talk about the book, and then I listened to the short story. It's the only short story that Toni Morrison ever wrote. And I think Zadie Smith does a really great job of breaking down all of the different things in here and making you think about it. So I actually liked listening to the introduction before the book, which I don't normally. But the short story by Morrison is about two girls who grow up, or they spend a short period of their life as young girls in an orphanage, but they aren't actually orphans. And throughout the whole novel and these two women's lives, race plays a really big part in their lives, but we are never told what either of their races are. So throughout the whole book, you get a feeling, you start to think, oh, well, this person is white and this person is black. And then something will happen and you'll be like, well, that doesn't make sense if this person is white and this person is black. So it's like a play on our own kind of biases around race. And I just thought it was super interesting because I definitely experienced exactly what Zadie Smith is explaining in the introduction about how people react to it. And like I, at certain points, was like, yeah, that person is definitely, of the two, that's the white person. And then I would be like, but that doesn't make any sense. And so like you're just guessing throughout the whole thing, when it's really just your mind trying to make sense and trying to put them in boxes. And it's just so interesting. Like, this is absolutely a social experiment and just geniusly crafted. And yeah, I would read that short story again just to experience it again. Because I just thought this was fantastic. So very, very little. And actually I think the short story is only like 60 pages or 70 pages. Highly recommend. All right, that is it. Those are the books that I read in January and February. I am sure that this was extremely long. So if you made it through the whole thing, claps for you. Also, I don't know, leave me a mushroom emoji down below. Don't ask me why it's a mushroom. It's just what I thought of at this very moment. Anyways, if you've read any of these, I would love to hear your thoughts below. If you're going to add any of them to your TBR after hearing me talk about them, I love to hear that. That always makes my day. And yeah, I will see you guys later, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. Bye!